The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, crystal fragmenting on marble as I watched my own brushstrokes auctioned for $330,000. Ashley stood beside the auctioneer, luminous in designer silk, accepting praise for her masterpiece, while I stood paralyzed in my server's uniform. For 16 years, I believed that painting was gone forever, ruined in the basement flood that took the rest. Yet there it was, my signature meticulously painted over with hers, my soul being sold to strangers, while my own daughter-in-law smiled as if she'd crafted magic instead of executing the perfect crime. Comment your location and subscribe to Shattered Voice to stay connected. Now let's dive into the story. Let me explain how I ended up serving champagne at the very gallery where my stolen dreams were auctioned to the highest bidder. Because sometimes life has a warped sense of humor, and sometimes that's precisely what you need to rediscover your spine. 3 months earlier, I was Margaret Thompson, 68 years old and unseen by all except debt collectors and grocery clerks who hardly looked up when I counted exact change. My husband, Robert, had been gone for 8 years, leaving a mortgage I couldn't afford and memories that didn't pay rent. My son David visited twice a year with his wife Ashley, just long enough to remind me of their disappointment in my choices. "Mom, you could have been somebody," David would say, glancing around my cluttered apartment with that particular expression children reserve for parents who fell short of potential. All that talent wasted. He wasn't wrong about the talent. Once, Margaret Thompson had been Maggie Hartwell, the girl who painted landscapes so vivid you could smell the wildflowers and feel the morning dew. I'd won a scholarship to the Chicago Art Institute, attracted gallery interest, and dreamed bigger than my small Kansas town. Then Robert arrived, sweet, steady Robert with his accounting degree and sensible plan. Marriage at 22, David at 24, and suddenly art became something I did in spare moments. The studio became a guest room, the easel was moved to the garage, and eventually the brushes were stored in boxes labeled "Someday." After Robert died, I'd tried to find those boxes, to recall who I used to be, but someday had been buried under 8 years of grief and financial strain. The basement flood 2 years ago supposedly destroyed what remained of my artistic past, canvases, brushes, even photographs of my work. Or so I believed. When David mentioned Ashley landed a job at the prestigious Whitmore Gallery downtown, I felt a flutter that might have been pride. At least someone in the family was making strides in the art world, even if only selling others' dreams. "Ashley's doing wonderfully," David said during his last visit. "She has a real eye for talent. Eleanor Price thinks she has potential as a curator." I smiled and nodded, playing the supportive mother-in-law I'd perfected over years. What else could I say? That watching someone else live the life I'd surrendered felt like my chest was filled with shattered glass. When Eleanor Price phoned to offer me a job serving at gallery events, I was too startled to decline. Ashley had recommended me, she explained, thought I might enjoy being around art again. "It isn't much," Eleanor said in her crisp, cultured tone, "just pouring champagne and passing canapés at openings and auctions, but Ashley mentioned your artistic background, and I prefer staff who appreciate what we display." The pay was fair, and frankly, I needed it. Social Security hardly covered rent, let alone food and utilities. So I agreed. I bought a simple black dress that didn't look discount store bleak and appeared for my first shift 3 weeks ago. The Whitmore Gallery was everything I dreamed of in my youth. Pristine walls displayed carefully curated pieces, perfect lighting made each painting glow. Hushed conversations spoke of composition and brushwork with reverence. Moving through those rooms with a champagne tray, I felt like a ghost attending her own funeral. Ashley had been polite but distant during my initial shifts, acknowledging me with slight nods as she guided wealthy collectors through exhibits. She belonged in this environment, polished, educated, speaking the language of art with effortless confidence, everything I might have become with different choices. But tonight was significant. Tonight was Ashley's first major auction as assistant curator, featuring emerging contemporary artists. The highlight was a landscape Eleanor had called absolutely breathtaking during the preview. I'd been arranging champagne flutes for early arrivals when I first saw it, displayed prominently in the main gallery under its own spotlight. Blood drained from my head so fast I gripped the serving table for balance. It was my painting, not similar to something I might have done, not echoing my style. It was precisely the landscape I'd painted of Miller's Creek in summer 2008. Every brushstroke just as I remembered. The creek winding through tall grass, the ancient oak with gnarled branches, the afternoon light filtering through leaves I'd spent weeks perfecting. But the signature in the lower right corner read A. Thompson in Ashley's precise script, painted over what I knew had been my own M. Hartwell. I stood there staring, convincing myself I was mistaken. Maybe grief and age had muddled my memory. Maybe I was imagining things. But then I noticed the tiny flaw that confirmed it was mine, a spot near the creek where I'd accidentally mixed too much blue into the green and spent hours correcting it, the spot that looked like an error to others but meant hours of frustration to the artist who made it. My painting, my work, being sold under Ashley's name. The auction began at 8, and I served champagne with hands that barely shook. Externally, I was invisible Margaret Thompson in a simple black dress. Internally, I was screaming. When the auctioneer announced, Lot 17, Ashley Thompson's remarkable debut piece, I positioned myself at the rear of the room with a clear view. Bidding started at $50,000. The price climbed steadily as hands rose around the room, numbers called that made my minimum wage existence feel smaller. Ashley stood near the front, face glowing with false humility as people congratulated her between bids. She wore the pearl necklace I'd given her 2 Christmases ago, back when I could still afford meaningful gifts. $100,000, $150,000, $200,000. David appeared beside her, arm around her shoulders. Both watched their future brighten with each bid. Their future, built on my stolen past. $300,000, $310,000, $330,000. Going once? That's when the champagne glass fell from my numb fingers, crystal erupting against marble like gunfire. Heads turned, Ashley's included, and for one terrible instant, our eyes met across the crowded room. I saw recognition flash in her gaze. Not guilt, not shame, but recognition and calculation, like someone doing rapid mental arithmetic. Sold! $330,000 for this remarkable piece by Ashley Thompson. Applause filled the room as I knelt to collect crystal shards with trembling fingers. A security guard appeared with a small broom, voice kind but firm. "Don't worry, ma'am. Happens often at these events. Why not take a break?" I nodded and headed to the staff room, leaving behind the sounds of celebration and the sight of Ashley accepting praise for selling my soul to strangers. In the tiny break room, I sat on a folding chair and studied my hands. 68 years old, and I'd just witnessed my daughter-in-law steal 16 years of my life in plain sight. The worst part wasn't the money. $330,000 was more than I'd earn in a decade of serving champagne. The worst part was her skill, How naturally she accepted admiration for work that had cost me months of dawns and late nights trying to capture light as it was meant to be seen. But as I sat surrounded by stacks of gallery programs and empty champagne boxes, something ignited in my chest that wasn't grief or shock. It was rage. Pure, clean rage that tasted like copper and felt like lightning. Ashley Thompson had made a costly error tonight. She'd assumed Margaret Thompson, the broken woman in the server's uniform, was the same as Maggie Hartwell, the artist who once had the fire to dream impossible things. Time to remind her exactly who she'd chosen to rob. I didn't go home after the auction. Instead, I drove to the all-night diner on 5th Street and ordered black coffee that tasted like regret, while piecing together how a painting I'd watched floodwater destroy 2 years ago ended up in Ashley's possession. The memory was sharp. I'd been downstairs searching for David's old baseball cards when the pipe burst. Water everywhere, soaking cardboard boxes and ruining everything stored below, including the wooden crate holding my finished paintings, the ones too painful to display but too precious to discard, or so I'd thought. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Pete Morrison, the contractor who'd handled flood cleanup. Pete had been Robert's bowling buddy and gave me a deal on restoration. Maybe he recalled something I'd forgotten. He answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "Margaret? Jesus, what time is it?" "Pete, I need to ask about the basement flood at my old house, the cleanup you did 2 years ago." "Margaret, it's past midnight. Can't this wait?" "Did you save anything from those flooded boxes?" A pause. "Some. You told me to toss it all." "Where did you throw it?" "Well, thing is, my nephew Danny helped with cleanup and asked if he could take some art stuff. Said his girlfriend painted and might restore some pieces. You told me you didn't care what happened to it." Danny Morrison. Ashley's maiden name was Morrison. "Pete, what's your nephew Danny's last name?" "Morrison. Why?" "And his girlfriend, what was her name?" "Ashley something. Pretty girl, really into art. Said she might salvage some of your paintings. Why ask now?" I hung up without answering and sat in the diner booth, coffee cooling as pieces clicked together like rounds loading into a firearm. Ashley Morrison. She'd been Ashley Morrison when she started dating David 8 years back, fresh from art school with a degree but no talent. I'd met her at Sunday dinner, watched her flip through art books and nod when David spoke of my wasted potential. She'd been so curious about my artistic past, asking about techniques and periods. I'd thought she was being polite, trying to bond. Instead, she'd been shopping. The flood was 2 years ago, just before David and Ashley married. Perfect timing to acquire a collection of original artwork and ample time to plan its use. I drove home in pre-dawn darkness, mind clearer than it had been in years. By the time I reached my apartment, I had a plan that would have made Robert proud. He'd always said I was too trusting, but he'd also taught me to keep thorough records of everything important. In my bedroom closet, behind seldom-used winter clothes, was a shoebox holding the documentation of my artistic life. Photos of paintings, sketches, even old exhibition programs from college years. Everything I'd need to prove Ashley Thompson's remarkable debut was painted by Margaret Hartwell in summer 2008. I spread photos across my kitchen table like playing cards, searching for the one I recalled taking of the Millers Creek landscape. There it was, third in the stack, showing my painting on the garage studio easel. The date stamp on back read July 15, 2008. The signature was clearly M. Hartwell. But I needed more than old photos. I needed expert testimony, documentation that would hold up if this turned legal. My first call at 9 a.m. was to Dr. Patricia Wells, my former art professor at the community college. Patricia had stayed in touch over the years, always urging me to paint again. She'd know how to verify artistic authenticity. Margaret, what a lovely surprise. How are you? Better than I have been in years, actually. Patricia, I need help with something unusual. How does one prove they painted a specific artwork? Several methods: photographic documentation, signature analysis, even paint composition testing in extreme cases. Why? I told her everything. Ashley, the stolen painting, the auction, even Pete Morrison's nephew, Danny. Patricia listened without interruption, making sounds suggesting she was taking notes. Margaret, this is serious fraud, art fraud, the kind that brings federal charges and prison time. I know, that's why I need to do this correctly. I can help document your work and provide expert testimony on your style and techniques. I still have some of your pieces from class, and I kept photos of student work from that period. But Margaret, understand what you're starting. This isn't just about money. What do you mean? Your daughter-in-law didn't steal just one painting. If she did this once, she's likely done it before. How many other pieces from your collection did she acquire during that cleanup? The question struck like ice water. I'd painted dozens of pieces over the years, perhaps hundreds counting studies and smaller works. Pete said Danny's girlfriend was interested in art stuff, not just one painting. Margaret, I need your help to discover what else she might have taken. Come to my office this afternoon. Bring everything. We'll build a case that will make the art world take notice. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, gazing at photos scattered like fragments of my soul I'd thought were lost forever. How many were in Ashley's apartment now, awaiting their moment? My phone buzzed with a text from David. Ashley said you worked the auction last night. How exciting you saw her big debut. We're celebrating tonight. Dinner at Romano's at 7 if you want to join. I stared at the message, then typed, I'd love to hear all about her artistic inspiration. Because if Ashley wanted to play successful artist, she'd learn the woman she'd robbed had very specific questions about where that inspiration originated. And Margaret Thompson, invisible champagne server and forgotten mother-in-law, was finished being polite. Romano's was the sort of restaurant that David took clients he wished to impress. All white linens and wine costing more per bottle than my monthly groceries. I arrived at 7 sharp, wearing my best dress and the smile that carried me through 40 years of marriage to a man who believed feelings were best kept private. Ashley was radiant, holding court at a corner table while David beamed beside her like a proud manager who'd discovered the next sensation. Margaret! David stood to hug me. His cologne was expensive, his enthusiasm genuine. I can't believe you saw Ashley's triumph firsthand. What were the odds? Astronomical, I agreed, taking the seat across. Ashley, you must be thrilled. $330,000? Quite a return. Her smile flickered momentarily, too quick for David to notice. I worked on that piece for months. It's wonderful when something you've poured your heart into finds the right home. Months, I repeated thoughtfully. Tell me about your process. Where did inspiration for such a detailed landscape come from? Ashley's eyes met mine across the candlelit table. I saw her calculating. How much did I know? How much did I suspect? How much could she admit? I spend considerable time outdoors, she said carefully. Natural settings speak to me, the way light shifts through the day, how water moves through landscapes. Miller's Creek is especially beautiful in summer, I said, watching her face. This time, her reaction wasn't fast enough to conceal. Ashley's fork halted halfway to her mouth. David glanced between us, confused. I'm sorry? Your painting. It's Miller's Creek, yes? The old oak, the bend where the current slows. I used to take David there when he was little. Remember, honey? You loved catching minnows by that fallen log. David brightened with memory. Oh my gosh, yes. We spent hours there. Ashley, when did you even see it? Ashley set her fork down with deliberate care. I explore many locations for inspiration. Sometimes I photograph places and work from memory later. Fascinating, I said, leaning forward with genuine seeming interest, because I could swear I saw old photos of that exact spot in my basement before the flood. Same angle, same light. What a coincidence we'd both be drawn to capture it identically. Silence stretched long enough for David to notice. He looked between Ashley and me, puzzled. What flood? Margaret, what are you talking about? The basement flood 2 years ago. Remember the burst pipe that ruined my old art supplies and paintings? Pete Morrison handled cleanup. Ashley had gone still, her professional composure locked like armor. David mentioned you used to paint. Such a shame to lose your work. Oh, but not all was lost, I said brightly. Pete's nephew, Danny, helped, and his girlfriend rescued some pieces, thought she might restore them. Isn't that wonderful? Nice to know my old work found someone who appreciated it. David frowned now, pieces connecting in his engineer's mind. Ashley, your maiden name is Morrison. Is Danny your cousin? The waiter appeared with wine, giving Ashley time to construct a reply. When he left, her smile was perfectly calibrated, apologetic but not guilty. I should have mentioned it sooner. Yes, Danny's my cousin. When he told me about water-damaged paintings, I offered to examine them. Most were beyond salvage, but a few had potential. I've been studying restoration techniques. So you restored Margaret's old paintings? David asked, pleased at this familial connection he'd missed. I tried to save what I could, but restoration can be transformative. Sometimes you end with something quite different from the original. I nodded thoughtfully. Different how? Water damage often obscures original signatures, makes authentication impossible. Sometimes restoration is so extensive it becomes a collaboration between original artist and restorer. The piece becomes something new. She was skilled, I admitted, not just at lying, but at crafting lies that sounded plausible to the uninformed. David nodded, impressed by his wife's artistic knowledge and generous spirit. That's amazing, Ashley. So Margaret's old paintings inspired your new work in a way. She met my eyes directly. Sometimes the past provides a foundation for future creativity. I smiled and raised my glass to future creativity built on solid foundations. We drank. Ashley's hand was steady as glass, but I read the message in her eyes clear as painted words. I know that you know, and I'm not afraid. The rest of dinner passed with surface pleasantries, and David's excited chatter about Ashley's promising career, accepted into a group show next month, 2 galleries interested, possibly a solo exhibition in spring, all built on the foundation of my stolen life's work. Saying goodbye in the parking lot, Ashley hugged me with daughter-in-law affection. Thank you for coming, Margaret. Family support means so much. Family should always look out for each other, I replied, squeezing back with equal warmth. I can't wait to see what you create next. Driving home, I felt lighter than in years. Ashley thought she'd won this round by admitting to restoration while claiming artistic transformation as her own. She'd built a story protecting her from outright theft accusations while still profiting from my life's work. But she made 2 critical errors tonight. First, she underestimated the strategic patience learned during 40 years with Robert Thompson. Second, she assumed Margaret Thompson, grieving widow and occasional champagne server, was the same as Maggie Hartwell, once fierce enough to believe she could paint the world as she saw it. Tomorrow, I'd call Dr. Wells and share Ashley's interesting theory about restoration as artistic collaboration. Then I'd call Pete Morrison and ask very specific questions about exactly which pieces Danny took. because if Ashley wanted to play the game of artistic attribution and collaborative restoration, I'd teach her rules she never learned in art school. Starting with the most important, always know exactly who you're stealing from. Dr. Patricia Wells's office at the community college remained as I remembered from continuing education classes 15 years prior. Paintings covered every wall, some professional, mostly student work showing promise. She'd always believed in displaying potential alongside achievement. "Margaret, you look different," she said, studying me over reading glasses. "Determined. I like it." I spread my documentation across her desk, photos, sketches, even detailed notes on paint colors and techniques for each piece. 40 years with an accountant had trained me to document everything. "Tell me about this restoration theory Ashley presented," Patricia said, reviewing photos. She claimed water damage made original signatures unreadable, and that extensive restoration creates collaboration between original artist and restorer, essentially arguing the restored piece becomes new art. Patricia snorted. "Complete nonsense legally. Restoration, however extensive, doesn't transfer artistic ownership. If I restore a damaged Monet, I don't become co-creator of a Monet. The original artist remains." She took a magnifying glass and examined the photo of my Miller's Creek painting. "Besides, this wasn't restoration, this was forgery. Look at this signature analysis." She pointed where Ashley's A. Thompson signature covered my original M. Hartwell. Under magnification, different paint layers were visible. See how the signature sits atop the painting surface instead of integrating into the final layer? Your original signature was painted over, not restored. That's deliberate fraud, not collaboration. What would hold up in court? Everything you've brought. Plus, I can provide expert testimony on your style and techniques. But Margaret, we need more evidence of this fraud's scope. How many pieces? I handed her the list compiled after calling Pete Morrison that morning. 23 paintings, from small studies to major works like the Miller's Creek landscape. Pete remembered because Danny borrowed his truck twice to transport everything. "My God," Patricia breathed. "If she's selling these at prices similar to Miller's Creek, we're discussing potential fraud worth millions." "There's more," I said, pulling out my phone. I researched Ashley's artistic career this morning. I'd spent hours tracing Ashley Thompson's professional history online. Art school graduate with mediocre grades, no gallery representation before marrying David, no sales or exhibitions in her own name until 18 months ago. Then a meteoric rise with sophisticated landscape work drawing immediate critical attention. Her artistic style supposedly matured around the time of my basement flood. Before that, her work was described as promising but lacking technical sophistication. Patricia took rapid notes. "We need to see her other pieces, the ones she claims as original work." "I have an idea. Ashley mentioned she's in a group show next month at the Riverside Gallery. I could attend." "Better," Patricia said, eyes light with intellectual, puzzle-solving enthusiasm. "I know the curator at Riverside, Helen Martinez. We attended graduate school together. She'd be very interested in artistic authenticity questions, especially with fraud involved." She took her phone. "Helen, it's Patricia Wells. I need help with something up your alley. How familiar are you with Ashley Thompson's work?" I listened to one side of a conversation growing increasingly interesting. Helen Martinez apparently had concerns about Ashley Thompson's rapid artistic development. The technique's sophistication didn't match her supposed artistic education timeline. Whispers existed in the art community about her work's authenticity. "Helen wants to meet you," Patricia said after hanging up. "Tomorrow at 2. She's been building her own file on Ashley Thompson, and your documentation might be exactly what she needs." Driving home, I felt satisfaction from pieces falling into place. Ashley built her career on my stolen work, but grew greedy. Instead of selling one or two pieces quietly and building a modest reputation, she created a body of work too sophisticated for her supposed background. That evening, David called with his usual weekly check-in, voice excited with Ashley's expanding opportunities. "Mom, you won't believe this. Ashley just got offered a solo exhibition at the Whitmore Gallery in 6 months. Eleanor Price thinks she could be the next major landscape artist. We're talking 20 pieces with prices starting at $50,000. 20 pieces, exactly the number I estimated Ashley stole from my collection. That's wonderful, dear. Ashley must be thrilled to display her life's work. She's working non-stop preparing new pieces. I barely see her. She's completely focused on making this exhibition perfect. Creating new original works from stolen paintings must take considerable time and effort. David, has Ashley ever discussed her artistic influences, where she draws inspiration? Interesting you ask. She's mentioned studying historical landscape techniques, examining how earlier artists captured natural light and water movement. She says understanding the masters helps develop her own voice. Understanding the masters, or understanding how to paint over their signatures and claim their work as her own. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment considering justice. For 16 years, I'd believed my artistic life was finished, not just ended, but erased, literally washed away in a basement flood that seemed final proof my creative dreams had been foolish. But my work wasn't destroyed, it was stolen, its value finally recognized by someone who understood its worth better than I had. Ashley Thompson built a career on my artistic ability, planning a major exhibition to cement her reputation as a talented landscape artist. But she'd made one crucial miscalculation. She assumed Margaret Thompson, invisible server in a simple black dress, would never discover what was taken, and even if she did, she'd never have courage or knowledge to fight back. Tomorrow, I'd meet Helen Martinez and add my documentation to her file. Then I'd attend Ashley's group show opening and see exactly how many stolen pieces were displayed under her name. Because Ashley Thompson was about to learn that some collaborations are less voluntary than others, and some restorations involve returning work to its rightful creator. Helen Martinez met me at a coffee shop near the Riverside Gallery, carrying a leather portfolio serious enough for legal documents. She was younger than expected, maybe 40, with focused intensity suggesting no time for small talk. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for meeting. Patricia Wells showed me your documentation, and frankly, it confirms suspicions I've had about Ashley Thompson's work for months." She opened her portfolio, spedding photos of Ashley's pieces from various exhibitions over the past year. 8 paintings total, all landscapes, all showing technical sophistication Helen found suspicious. "Look at this progression," she said, pointing to dates and venues. 18 months ago, Ashley Thompson was a recent art school graduate with basic skills. Then suddenly, she produces work like this. The photos showed paintings I recognized, though Ashley had altered enough that casual observers might not notice. My summer meadow study became her wildflower reverie. My winter stream scene was now frozen contemplation. The technical jump is impossible. You don't go from student-level work to this mastery in 18 months without years of intensive study or access to work by master artists. Or access to finished paintings you can claim as your own, I said quietly. "Exactly. Patricia explained your flood situation and the connection through Ashley's cousin. Mrs. Thompson, I believe Ashley has been systematically passing your work as her own, likely for over a year." Helen produced another set of photos showing detailed signature and brushwork shots. "I've documented every piece of hers I could access. Look at these signature overlays." Under close examination, each painting showed the same pattern, original signatures painted over with Ashley's careful script, just like the Miller's Creek landscape that sold for $330,000. This is systematic art fraud, Helen stated firmly. Next week's group show gives us opportunity to document it properly. What do you need from me? I need you to attend the opening as my guest. Bring your documentation and be prepared to identify your original work. I'll have a photographer document everything we find. She handed me a business card. There's something else you should know. I've contacted the FBI's art crime team. They're investigating rising art fraud cases involving emerging artists, and Ashley Thompson's rapid success fits their pattern. The FBI. The weight of Ashley's actions sank in. This wasn't just a family dispute over old paintings. This was federal crime. Helen, what happens to David, my son? He has no idea. If he's genuinely uninvolved, he should be fine legally. But Mrs. Thompson, this will destroy their marriage. Financial fraud, criminal charges, prison time. Your daughter-in-law faces serious consequences. I thought of David's excited calls, his pride in Ashley's success, his plans for their future built on her artistic career. 42 and still naive enough to believe the best about loved ones. He deserves to know the truth, I said finally. The truth will emerge regardless. The question is whether you want to control how and when, or let the FBI investigation proceed without your input. Friday morning, 1 week before the group show opening, I called David asking to meet for lunch. He suggested our usual spot, a casual restaurant where he could eat quickly between client meetings. He arrived exactly on time, already checking his phone as he kissed my cheek. Success in his engineering consulting firm made him busier, not necessarily happier. "How's Ashley's show preparation?" I asked after ordering. "Incredible. She's working 16-hour days perfecting every detail. The gallery wants earlier pieces to show artistic development, so she's reviewing her whole portfolio." Earlier pieces, my stolen paintings Ashley planned to display as examples of her artistic growth. "David, I need to tell you something important about Ashley's art." He looked up from his phone, giving full attention. "What do you mean?" I told him everything: the flood, Danny Morrison, the Miller's Creek painting at auction, my meetings with Dr. Wells and Helen Martinez. I kept my voice calm and factual as Robert presented financial information to clients. David's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, anger, finally sick comprehension as details connected. "Mom, this is insane. You're accusing my wife of art fraud?" "I'm telling you what I discovered when I saw my painting sold with her signature. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. You said Danny took damaged paintings for restoration. Maybe Ashley genuinely thought they were beyond saving, and her restoration made them new pieces." I pulled out my phone, showing Patricia's photo of the signature overlay on the Miller's Creek piece. "Does this look like restoration?" David stared at the image, his engineering mind trained to analyze structural problems, applying same logic to his marriage. "Jesus Christ," he whispered finally. "How many paintings?" 23 I can document, probably more I didn't photograph or forgot. "And the value?" "If selling at prices similar to Miller's Creek, potentially millions." David put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes held the devastated expression from his father's funeral. "What do I do, Mom?" "Talk to Ashley before next Friday's opening. Give her chance to explain or come forward voluntarily. After that, Helen Martinez and the FBI handle it." "The FBI?" His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, Ashley could go to prison." "Yes," I said gently, "she could." We sat silently while David processed the destruction of everything he'd thought his life was building toward. Finally, he spoke. "She knew it, didn't she? When you saw each other at the auction, that's why she's been so stressed about this upcoming show." I think she known this day would come eventually. David's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced automatically. Ashley wants to postpone dinner tonight because she needs to work late on show preparation. He looked at me with eyes aged several years in an hour. I guess I know what she's really preparing for. Friday afternoon, preparing for Ashley's group show opening, I thought of the woman I'd been first entering the Whitmore Gallery 3 months prior, invisible Margaret Thompson, serving champagne to people living the life she'd surrendered, grateful for minimum wage and afraid to want more than survival. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who recalled believing in her own worth, fighting for what belonged to her, refusing to disappear because someone found it convenient. Ashley Thompson was about to learn that stealing from the wrong person can be the costliest mistake. But first, she'd have to explain to a room of art experts exactly where her remarkable artistic talent originated, and I'd be there to help her tell that story. The Riverside Gallery opening held everything expected from Ashley's world. Beautiful people with wine glasses, speaking softly of artistic vision and emotional authenticity. I arrived fashionably late in my best black dress and pearl earrings Robert gave for our 20th anniversary. Helen Martinez found me within minutes, accompanied by a young man with an expensive camera and focused, evidence-documenting expression. Margaret, this is James Chen, our photographer. He'll take detailed shots of everything we discuss. I nodded, strangely calm despite knowing tonight changed everything. Around me, people admired Ashley's remarkable artistic development, while I prepared to reveal exactly how that development occurred. Ashley looked stunning in flowing midnight blue, hair swept up to show diamond earrings probably costing more than my rent. She held court near a painting I recognized as my autumn forest study, now titled Seasonal Transition and priced at $45,000. Mrs. Thompson, she approached with perfect gallery smile, air kissing my cheeks. So glad you could make it. David said you were feeling unwell. Much better now, I replied, studying her face for signs she knew tonight differed. Seeing your work displayed so beautifully is inspiring. Her smile never wavered, but I caught her quick glance toward the gallery entrance, looking for David, or perhaps Helen Martinez, whose art authentication reputation Ashley would certainly know. I'd love to hear about your artistic process for this piece, I gestured toward my autumn forest. The way you captured light filtering through leaves is remarkably sophisticated. Oh, you know how it is, Ashley laughed, sound perfectly pitched for nearby listeners. Sometimes inspiration strikes and your hands know exactly what to do. Indeed they do, especially with years of practice capturing that exact lighting effect. This time her smile faltered momentarily. I'm sorry? Nothing important, just remembering hours spent in that same forest studying how afternoon light changes autumn leaves' color temperature. Ashley's eyes sharpened. I saw rapid calculations. Around us, other visitors continued conversations, unaware they witnessed opening moves of a more serious game. Margaret, you should meet other artists, Ashley said, voice carrying subtle warning. I'd hate for you to dwell on the past. Oh, I'm very interested in the present, and the future, for that matter. Helen Martinez appeared beside us with perfect timing. Ashley, congratulations on a wonderful showing. I'm Helen Martinez from Riverside Curatorial staff. Could I ask about your artistic development? I watched Ashley's face carefully as Helen introduced herself. Recognition and concern flashed before professional courtesy replaced them. Of course, though my husband arrives soon, I promised to introduce him around. This won't take long, Helen said smoothly. I'm particularly interested in how your technique evolved over 2 years. Your earlier work showed promise, but this sophistication represents quite a leap. Intensive study and mentorship from experienced artists. Could you discuss these mentors? I'm always interested in how emerging artists develop skills. Ashley glanced around, clearly seeking escape.
Mostly informal, learning from established techniques, studying historical approaches to landscape painting. Fascinating. And this piece, Helen gestured toward my autumn forest, the brushwork shows mastery of techniques usually taking decades to develop. Sometimes talent develops unexpectedly, voice cooling.
Helen pulled out her phone, showing Ashley a photograph, my 2007 photo of the original autumn forest painting, complete with signature and date stamp. Would you say this earlier version influenced your current work? Color drained from Ashley's face as she stared. Around us, conversation continued, but the three of us stood in sudden electric tension. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying. I'm asking direct questions about artistic provenance and authenticity, questions the FBI art crime team will ask next week. Ashley's composure finally cracked. I think this conversation is over. Actually, I said quietly, I think it's just beginning. Because, Ashley, that photograph Helen showed, I took it 13 years ago of a painting I created, the same painting you've been selling as your own. Ashley looked between Helen and me, her perfect gallery persona dissolving toward panic. You can't prove anything. Oh, but we can, Helen said pleasantly. Signature analysis, Pate composition testing, photographic documentation over a decade. Mrs. Thompson documented her artistic work remarkably thoroughly. David chose that moment to arrive. I watched Ashley's face as she saw him approach. He looked terrible, hollow-eyed and exhausted, like a man who'd spent a week watching his world collapse. David, he said quietly upon reaching us, we need to talk. Not here, she hissed. Then where? When? After the FBI arrests you? The words carried further than David intended. Nearby conversations faltered as people turned. Ashley's career was built on reputation and connections, and David just threatened both before her professional community. David, you're causing a scene. I'm causing a scene? You built our life on stolen art, and I'm the problem? Helen stepped smoothly between them. Perhaps we should continue somewhere more private. But Ashley was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the gallery's back exit. I followed, heart pounding with knowledge everything finally came to a head. In the alley behind the gallery, Ashley turned on me with fury no longer hidden behind professional courtesy. You vindictive old woman, you couldn't stand someone actually made something of your mediocre work. My mediocre work you've sold for hundreds of thousands. Work rotting in your basement. Work you'd given up on. I saved those paintings and made them mean something. David stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Ashley, you stole from my mother. I rescued art from oblivion and gave it recognition it deserved. Your mother served champagne for minimum wage while masterpieces gathered dust. Her casual cruelty hit like a physical blow. In Ashley's mind, I was just an obstacle to remove. My life's work nothing but raw material for her ambitions. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. I had given up, but you erred, Ashley. You assumed I'd stay given up. Police sirens grew louder. Helen had apparently followed through involving law enforcement. Ashley heard them too. Her expression shifted from fury to calculation as options narrowed rapidly. This isn't over, she said, looking directly at me. You've no idea what you're destroying. I have every idea. I'm destroying a criminal enterprise built on my stolen life's work, and I'm enjoying every minute. Police cars turned into the alley, lights painting brick walls red and blue. Ashley Thompson's career as a celebrated emerging artist was about to end abruptly, but my career as someone refusing invisibility was just beginning. The arrest was surprisingly climactic. No dramatic handcuffs or shouting, just two federal agents in dark suits explaining Ashley's rights while she maintained composure with skill, suggesting preparation for this moment. Mrs. Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit art fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. I watched from the gallery doorway as they led her to an unmarked sedan. David stood motionless in the alley, like someone witnessing a car accident involving his entire future. Agent Sarah Martinez, no relation to Helen, found me 20 minutes later in the gallery's back office, giving my statement to young FBI technician Williams. Mrs. Thompson, we'll need your cooperation. This case appears larger than initially suspected. Larger? How? Agent Martinez sat across, expression serious. Your daughter-in-law wasn't working alone. We've tracked a network of art fraud cases involving restoration on supposedly damaged pieces. Ashley Thompson was part of a sophisticated operation. Implications hit like ice water. How many other artists did she steal from? Unsure yet, but we've identified at least 12 other cases where emerging artists showed suspicious technical skill improvements, often coinciding with access to damaged artwork collections. Williams looked up from his laptop. Mrs. Thompson, when you spoke with Pete Morrison about cleanup, did he mention others interested in damaged paintings? Danny Morrison was the only one mentioned, Ashley's cousin. We need to speak with Danny Morrison, and we need a complete inventory of every piece taken from your collection. Over the next 3 hours, I provided the most detailed artistic autobiography of my life. Every painting I recalled, techniques used, even preferred paint brands. Williams photographed my documentation, while Agent Martinez asked questions revealing how much the FBI already knew about Ashley's operation. Mrs. Thompson, did Ashley ever mention other artists she mentored or collaborated with? I recalled gallery conversations overheard during champagne serving days. She mentioned studying historical landscape techniques, but I assumed she meant books or museum visits. We think she meant studying actual historical paintings reported as damaged or destroyed, insurance fraud combined with art theft. Essentially, Ashley's involvement scope was staggering, not just stealing from one grieving widow, but participating in systematic looting of American artistic heritage. David found me in the FBI office at midnight, looking like he'd aged a decade in one evening. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I know, honey. She's been lying for years about everything: family background, artistic training, even how we met. Agent Martinez looked up from files. Mr. Thompson, what do you mean about how you met? David rubbed tired eyes. Ashley said she was a gallery assistant when we met, but tonight I learned she actually worked for a restoration company specializing in insurance claims. She'd been targeting collections that suffered damage. Including mine, said I quietly. Including yours. Ashley researched you after learning about the flood through Danny, discovered you were a widow with no close family, someone unlikely to pursue legal action even if discovering what was taken. Ashley's crime's calculated nature was somehow worse than random theft. She'd studied my life, identified me as a suitable victim, and built a relationship with my son specifically to access stolen artwork. There's more, David continued. I found files in her home office, documentation on other artists, other collections. Mom, Ashley wasn't just stealing your work. She was running an art fraud business. Agent Martinez leaned forward. What documentation? Photographs, research notes, even financial projections on stolen pieces' value. She had folders on dozens of artists. David, we need those files, tonight, if possible. They're in our home safe. Ashley doesn't know I have the combination. By 3 a.m., I sought in Ashley and David's pristine living room while FBI agents photographed contents of a safe holding business records for a multi-million-dollar art fraud operation. The files were meticulous. Ashley documented everything: where pieces were acquired, restoration needed for saleability, which galleries would accept questionable provenance, which critics could be influenced for positive reviews. My folder was thick, containing photos of all 23 paintings Danny took, plus detailed notes on my artistic style and techniques. Ashley had studied my work more carefully than any critic. But what chilled my blood was discovering I wasn't Ashley's first victim. Files revealed a 5-year pattern targeting elderly artists whose work was reported damaged or destroyed, insurance payouts for lost collections actually being sold through Ashley's gallery connections. "Mrs. Thompson," Agent Martinez said, holding a photo from Ashley's files, "have you seen this woman?" The photo showed an elderly woman, perhaps 75, beside an ocean wave painting, face radiant with pride and accomplishment. "I don't think so. Who is she?" "Eleanor Caldwell, died 2 years ago, supposedly in poverty. Despite being a talented marine artist, her family donated remaining work to charity after her death." Agent Martinez showed more photos from Eleanor's file, dozens of paintings documented with the same meticulous attention given my collection. "We believe Eleanor Caldwell's family was told her work was destroyed in a house fire. Meanwhile, Ashley sold Eleanor's paintings through high-end galleries, claiming them as her early marine landscape experiments." Ashley's operations scope was breathtaking, not just theft, but systematic looting disguised as artistic development, preying on families trusting loved ones' legacies were handled properly. How many artists total? 15 cases identified so far. Estimated stolen artwork value approaches $8 million. $8 million in stolen dreams, stolen legacies, stolen life's work. Artists dying believing their contributions were lost to floods, fires, accidents, never knowing their work was celebrated and sold under another's name. Dawn broke as FBI finished documenting Ashley's files. I stood on the front steps of the house visited for many family dinners, watching agents carry evidence boxes to unmarked cars. David appeared beside me with 2 coffees smelling like salvation. "What happens now?" "Justice," I said, "for Eleanor Caldwell and 14 other artists who deserved better, and recognition for work that should never have been forgotten." Morning sun painted sky gold and pink, the kind of light inspiring every landscape I'd ever created. For the first time in years, I looked at that light and felt urged to paint it myself, to capture it with my own hands instead of watching another claim credit for seeing beauty. Ashley Thompson stole my past, but she accidentally gave me something more valuable: knowledge that my work was always worth fighting for. Media attention began next morning. "Emerging artist arrested in multi-million-dollar art fraud scheme" headlines appeared everywhere. By noon, my phone rang with reporters wanting interviews with the elderly victim who brought down an art forgery ring. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to be anyone's inspiration story yet. Dr. Patricia Wells called around 3 p.m. with news making my hands shake. "Margaret, the Whittemore Gallery contacted me. They want to host a retrospective of your original work. They're calling it Recovered: The Art of Margaret Hartwell." My work isn't famous enough for a retrospective. It is now. 16 of your pieces have sold for 6 figures over 2 years. You're already a recognized artist. You just didn't know it. The irony cut sharply. Ashley's theft made me more successful than when actually creating the work. "Margaret, I haven't painted in 8 years. "Then perhaps it's time to start again." That evening, I drove to the storage unit holding Robert's things after selling the house. Behind boxes of accounting files and old furniture, I found art supplies packed after his death. Brushes stiff with old paint, possibly usable color tubes, the small easel used for quick studies. Loading everything into my car felt like an archaeological dig into my own past life. Who was Margaret Hartwell? Could she still exist? Or had too many years as Robert's wife and David's mother erased her completely? I set up the easel in my apartment's tiny living room, facing the window overlooking the city. Evening light was terrible for painting, but it was available light. The first brushstroke felt like coming home. I painted 3 hours straight, losing myself in familiar rhythm of color and composition. Nothing ambitious, just a simple study of my window view. But my hands remembered things my mind forgot: how to layer colors for depth, suggest texture with few strokes, captured changing light. Finally, stepping back to examine what I'd created, tears blurred my vision. It wasn't my best work, but it was mine, created by my hands, signed with my name, belonging to no one but me. Next morning, I awoke to my story on the art section front page. The reporter found Eleanor Caldwell's daughter, who provided quotes about her mother's lost paintings recovered through my case. "My mother died thinking her life's work was destroyed," Linda Caldwell was quoted. "To learn someone sold her paintings and claimed credit for her artistic vision, it's devastating, but also validating. Mom's work was good enough to steal." I called Linda Caldwell that afternoon. She lived 3 hours away in the same coastal town where her mother painted marine landscapes 40 years. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is Margaret Thompson. Margaret Hartwell, I should say." "Oh my God, you're the one who brought this to light. I've wanted to thank you." "I think we should meet, all of us, all families affected by Ashley's fraud." "Wonderful idea. There are things the FBI hasn't told media yet, things about how extensive this operation truly was." We arranged to meet the following Saturday at Eleanor Caldwell's former studio, preserved exactly as her mother left it. The coastal drive gave time to consider legacy and recognition, how Ashley's crime revealed value of work supposed to be forgotten. Eleanor Caldwell's studio was a converted garage facing the ocean, windows positioned to capture natural light all day. Her final painting remained on the easel, an unfinished seascape showing a master's understanding of water and light. Linda was my age, perhaps 65, with her mother's artistic eye and father's practicality. She taught 40 years, raising her own family while helping Eleanor maintain a modest career selling paintings to local tourists and seasonal residents. "Mom never sold a painting over $500, Linda said as we reviewed Eleanor's remaining work. "She always said she painted for joy, not money. But seeing her pieces sell for $50,000 each under another's name, it proved she was better than she ever knew. That's what hurts most." I understood that pain intimately. How many artists die believing their work wasn't important enough to matter, never knowing others would later recognize its true value? "Linda, I want to organize something, a group exhibition featuring recovered work from all artists Ashley stole from, not as victims, but as accomplished artists we were." Linda's eyes lit with the same enthusiasm I saw in Patricia Wells recognizing a good idea. A celebration instead of a memorial. Mom would have loved that. We spent the afternoon planning. Linda had coastal art community contacts. I had new connections through the FBI investigation and media coverage. Together, we could create something honoring original artists while exposing Ashley's crime's full scope. Driving home, I felt something not experienced in years: excitement for a project worth full attention and energy. Not just recovering my stolen past, but building something new from Ashley's wreckage. My phone rang, reaching city limits. David called with news, making me pull over to listen properly. "Mom, Ashley's lawyer called. She wants to deal with the FBI, offering information about the entire forgery network for reduced charges." "What information?" "Names, locations, financial records. The FBI thinks she was a mid-level operator in something bigger." So Ashley wasn't the mastermind I had assumed. She was another victim, recruited and used by people recognizing her desperation for artistic success and exploiting it for profit. It didn't excuse her actions, but explained how a small-town art school graduate orchestrated such sophisticated fraud. She'd had help, guidance, probably threats ensuring compliance. "David, how are you handling this?" "I'm leaving her," he said quietly. "I have to. Not just because of fraud, but because she looked me in the eye 3 years lying about everything that mattered. I can't rebuild a marriage on that foundation." I thought of Robert, 40 years of honesty and shared values. David deserved that partnership, not a relationship founded on calculated deception. "I'm sorry, honey. I know you loved her." I loved who I thought she was. Turns out that person never existed. After hanging up, I sat in my car watching sunset light paint sky colors demanding canvas capture. Tomorrow, I'd call the Whitmore Gallery about the retrospective, start planning the group exhibition with Linda Caldwell, begin reclaiming Margaret Hartwell from Margaret Thompson's invisible life ashes. Ashley stole my past, but accidentally showed me I still had a future worth fighting for. The phone call came at 6 a.m. Tuesday, 3 weeks after Ashley's arrest. Agent Martinez sounded exhausted but grimly satisfied. "Mrs. Thompson, come in immediately. Ashley's cooperation uncovered something unexpected." "What?" She wasn't just stealing from individual artists. She was part of a network systematically looting museum storage, insurance salvage operations, even estate sales, organized crime on a national scale. An hour later, I sat in the FBI field office viewing photos and documents revealing Ashley's involvement true scope. Names, addresses, financial records spanning a decade, a business plan for systematic destruction of American artistic heritage. "Mrs. Thompson, your case broke this open. Without your documentation and willingness to pursue prosecution, we never would have discovered the full network." I studied photos of other stolen works, recognizing styles and techniques from different periods and regions: 1960s abstract expressionist pieces, rural folk art, even works appearing from museum collections. How is that possible? Museums have security, authentication? Storage facilities are less secure than exhibition areas. Many museums have thousands of stored pieces rarely reviewed or inventoried. A few missing items can go unnoticed years, especially if replaced with documentation claiming pieces were damaged or destroyed. Agent Martinez handed me a folder marked "Recovery Operations." Inside were photos of artwork being returned to families, museums, and estate collections, told pieces were lost forever. "This is what your courage made possible," she said. 17 families recovered loved ones' work, 4 museums recovered pieces thought permanently lost, and we've located approximately 300 additional stolen pieces. I viewed photo after photo of people holding paintings, sculptures, drawings, artistic legacies returned to rightful owners. Elderly women like Linda Caldwell seeing their mother's work again. Adult children discovering their father's sculptures weren't destroyed in warehouse fires after all. What happens to Ashley? She'll serve time, but probably less than without cooperation. Her information helps prosecute this operation's organizers, people stealing from artists over a decade. That afternoon, I drove to David's apartment. He'd moved from the house shared with Ashley days after Ashley's arrest. He looked healthier than in weeks, like someone stopped carrying an unrecognized weight. "Mom, I've been thinking about you rebuilding your artistic career. I want to help.
Not financially, I know you don't need that now, but practically, you'll need a studio, proper equipment, maybe assistance with exhibitions and marketing. The offer touched me more than he probably realized. David spent years politely dismissing my artistic ambitions as hobbies. Now he offered to help make them real. David, are you sure you have your own career to rebuild? My career is fine. My life needs rebuilding. I want to do something that matters, something that helps instead of just making money. We spent the evening planning. David would use his engineering background to help design a proper studio space and business connections to navigate launching an artistic career at 68. I would focus on creating new work and organizing the group exhibition Linda Caldwell and I planned. The Whitmore Gallery agreed to host Recovered, the art of Margaret Hartwell in 6 months, giving time to create new pieces alongside exhibiting original work. Eleanor Price was surprisingly enthusiastic, perhaps recognizing publicity value associating with a nationally noted case. Margaret, you've become something of a folk hero in the art world, Eleanor told me during planning. The artist who brought down a forgery ring. People are fascinated by your story. I didn't want to be a folk hero. I wanted to be an artist. But if notoriety helped rebuild my career and honor other stolen legacies, I could accept being both. That evening, I set up my easel and began work on a painting planned for weeks. Not a landscape, but a portrait. Eleanor Caldwell, painted from Linda's photo, standing beside her easel with ocean behind. I wanted to capture something specific in Eleanor's expression, the quiet satisfaction of someone knowing her work was good, even if the world didn't recognize it yet. The confidence of an artist painting for the right reasons, regardless of external validation. As I worked, I considered legacy and recognition, the difference between being seen and being valued. Ashley made my work visible, but tried erasing me in the process. The real victory wasn't recovering stolen paintings, it was rediscovering the woman who created them. The phone rang at 11, interrupting concentration. Linda Caldwell calling with excitement carrying clearly across the line. Margaret, the Norton Museum just called. They want to participate in our group exhibition, offering to host it in their main gallery with full museum backing. A major museum exhibition for artists told their work was not important enough to preserve. Linda, that's incredible. There's more. The FBI investigation identified 43 artists whose work was stolen by this network, 43 families who thought loved ones' legacies were gone forever. I thought of Eleanor Caldwell's unfinished seascape still on her easel like a promise awaiting fulfillment, of my own work rescued from Ashley's fraud and returned to my name, of artists whose greatest recognition came after someone tried to steal their contributions to the world. Linda, we're not just organizing an exhibition, we're building a monument. To what? To the idea that no artist's work should ever be forgotten, and no thief should ever steal another's vision of beauty. Hanging up and returning to my Eleanor Caldwell portrait, I realized something fundamentally changed in how I viewed my own life. 3 months ago, I was Margaret Thompson, invisible widow serving champagne to people living the life she'd surrendered. Tonight, I was Margaret Hartwell again, artist and advocate, painting portraits of women refusing to let their stories be erased. And tomorrow, I'd awaken and continue ensuring no one ever forgot the difference between the two.
6 months later, I stood in the Norton Museum's main gallery, watching people study my Eleanor Caldwell portrait with attention I'd dreamed of receiving my entire artistic life. The museum exhibition, Stolen Voices, Recovered Art, Reclaimed Legacies, drew crowds nationwide, transforming an art theft story into a celebration of artistic perseverance. But tonight's real victory wasn't crowds or critical acclaim. It was Linda Caldwell standing beside her mother's recovered seascapes, telling visitors about Eleanor's 40-year career painting the same coastline with unwavering dedication to capturing light on water. She never wanted fame, Linda explained to a young art student. She wanted to paint what she saw beautifully and honestly. Fame was others' concern. The exhibition featured work from 38 of the 43 artists whose legacies were stolen by Ashley's network. 5 families chose not to participate, preferring to keep recovered pieces private. I understood their choice, though I'd chosen differently. Agent Martinez found me before my Miller's Creek landscape, the painting starting everything when Ashley sold it for $330,000. Tonight, it was displayed with original signature restored and a placard detailing its journey from creation to theft to recovery. Mrs. Thompson, Ashley was sentenced this morning, 8 years federal prison, possible parole in 5. I felt surprisingly little satisfaction. Ashley's punishment wouldn't undo damage caused, and her cooperation was essential to recovering hundreds of stolen pieces. The others, the people who recruited her? Most face much longer sentences. The organizer, Marcus Webb, got 25 years. He'd run this operation since 2008, stealing from artists, estates, and insurance claims across 15 states. 25 years seemed appropriate for someone making a career erasing others' legacies. Webb would spend his productive life in prison, while artists he robbed finally received deserved recognition. David appeared beside us, looking proud as parents do when children exceed expectations. "Mom, the Times reviewer wants to interview you about new pieces created for the show." I'd spent the past 6 months painting again, rediscovering forgotten techniques and developing new approaches to subjects fascinating me decades ago. The 12 new paintings in tonight's exhibition represented my life's most sustained creative period, work belonging entirely to me without question or theft. "David, I'm not sure I'm ready for that attention." "Mom, you've become one of the country's most recognized landscape artists. The Whitney Museum wants to acquire 3 pieces for their permanent collection." The Whitney Museum. I thought of 22-year-old Maggie Hartwell, fresh from art school, dreaming of exactly this recognition. She would have been terrified and thrilled by tonight's success. At 68, I felt mostly grateful. Dr. Patricia Wells joined our group carrying a champagne flute and wearing a satisfied expression of someone whose faith in a student was completely vindicated. "Margaret, the community college wants to establish the Margaret Hartwell Scholarship for non-traditional art students, people returning to artistic careers after raising families or life direction changes." "Margaret, I can't have a scholarship named after me. I'm still learning to be an artist again myself." "That's exactly why you should. You're proof it's never too late to reclaim your creative life." As the evening continued, I considered identity and reinvention, the difference between who you are and who others decide you should be. For 8 years after Robert's death, I had accepted the diminished widow role, someone whose productive life was essentially finished. Ashley's theft accidentally revealed my productive life never actually ended. It was just interrupted. Eleanor Price from the Whitmore Gallery approached as I contemplated my newest painting, a self-portrait titled "Artist at Work," showing myself painting in my apartment studio. "Margaret, I hope you'll consider a solo exhibition with us next year. Based on tonight's response, you could easily fill our main gallery." A solo exhibition at the Whitmore Gallery, where this journey began watching Ashley sell my stolen work. The symmetry was almost too perfect to believe. "Margaret, I'll need time to create enough new work for a full show." "Take all the time you need. Good art can't be rushed." As the museum reception wound down and guests departed, I walked through the exhibition one final time. 43 artists represented. Hundreds came to see work supposed to be lost forever. Stories of survival and recovery, of art outlasting those trying to steal it. In the main gallery's center, a video installation played interviews with family members discussing recovered pieces. Linda Caldwell spoke of her mother's dedication to painting the same coastline 40 years, finding something new in familiar subjects daily. An elderly man named Robert Jimenez described his father's 1960s abstract paintings, work dismissed as worthless when stolen, but recognized as significant when recovered. Each story differed but shared the same themes: persistence, dedication to artistic vision regardless of external recognition, belief that creating beauty was a worthy life pursuit. Watching these testimonials, I realized Ashley accidentally gave me something more valuable than the money made from my stolen work. She forced me to defend my artistic identity, to prove Margaret Hartwell was always worth fighting for. David found me before Eleanor Caldwell's unfinished seascape, which Linda loaned as a symbol of interrupted but continuing creative life. "Mom, ready to go home?" I looked around the gallery once more, seeing my work displayed alongside pieces by artists whose names are now known because someone tried to steal their legacies.
"Yes," I said, linking my arm through his. "I'm ready to go home and paint." Because tomorrow morning I'd awaken in my studio apartment and continue work begun 46 years ago when I first picked up a brush, deciding the world was beautiful enough to deserve careful attention. And this time, no one could ever take that away. Thank you for following this journey of stolen art and reclaimed voice. For more stories of truth and resilience, subscribe to Shattered Voice.